Thanks. I'm Mark, and I'm going to talk to you guys about the failures the blue team often makes when they're trying to investigate an incident, even while they often don't know yet whether it's a red team, so an exercise, or a real incident. And I'm also, before that, going to explain how we perform our red teaming, what kind of infrastructure we use, and how we set up our own monitoring to abuse these mistakes of the red team to our own advantage, and in order to even bring more value to the customer. About us, it's going to be about me. Mark Bergman, I'm the first year on this slide. I've been programming on mainframes and rolled into security. I code a lot. I script a lot, I should say, because it's very dirty, but it works. And then we've got Mark Smeets, who unfortunately couldn't be here due to a car accident. So I'm going to do this talk alone. Mark wants you all to know that he's getting better, and he says hi, and he's really, really sorry that he can't be here. He really wished to be here. Well, that's what life is. First, in order to get a feeling about the audience we have here, whom here is not a security professional in any way? Hands? Few hands, okay. Well, it makes sense that we have security professionals mostly in the room. Whom here is interested in security, feels he's a pen tester, security researcher, but does not do that for a profession? So who here is hobby? Hands full. Whom here is professional pen tester, so security, offensive security pen tester, or red teamer? Red teamers in the room, yes. Defense, blue teamers, guys that work in a SOC, system administrators, whatever you see on the inside of our clients. Thanks. Gives me an idea. This is how we try to explain what we think red teaming or good red teaming should be. It should be an exercise. It should not be, what you might see here is a match, but it's not a match, it's a training. It's blue against red, but it's red here is the trainer, meaning red has to give out punches, but not knock out the opponent. What we quite often see, a mistake we see often made by red teams, is that they break into the customer, their client, steal without being seen whatever they should steal, the flags that they have agreed on, then runs away, does a little dance and say, "We got ya." And blue never saw anything. The client pays a lot of money for that. But what did they learn if you perform a red team like that? They learn nothing, or virtually nothing. Yeah, they know that they can be robbed without being seen. Well, I could tell them that for free. What I think a red team should do is throw in some punches, but also be open for a blue team to respond and react. They might not know yet it's a training or it's a simulation, and you allow them to punch back, and you throw a few other punches, and in the end you can slowly mold and train your opponent. And that's how the blue team actually gets better. But in order to be the trainer, in order to be the red team in this training game, you have to be on top of the game. You have to be so much ahead of the blue team that you have the room to play around with him, to play around with the blue team, have him chase you without the operation failing completely. In order to do so, in order to perform such a red team, we need quite a lot of infrastructure. Here is the simplified image of the infrastructure we usually set up before our exercises, being a lot of redirectors, disposable machines at DigitalOcean or somewhere else, and then our own command and control server in the red. An attacker will do the same, and we will do the same, which is on our own hardware, because it will contain a lot of sensitive data. And then here we have the customer. We might have corporate proxies. We might use DNS as channels, but we might have all sorts of stuff happening there. But basically, in order to have a good offensive infrastructure, there's quite a lot of stuff going on. We often, during our bigger engagements, have at least 5 or more, and sometimes even up to 30 of these redirectors that we use to send traffic to either our Cobalt Strike backend or to other places. We might have a few more just to serve as an endpoint for domain fronting. We'll have team servers. And as we work a lot with Cobalt Strike, you can only have one profile, one communication profile per server. So it's not weird that we would use up to 5 or even more team servers during one op for one customer. Several fake profiles, websites, tracking pixels, so pixels we use in emails to make sure that we see if someone reads the email or maybe even investigates it later on. Also, that all points to our own web server. We often have another web server for content delivery, that might be Word documents, it might be payloads in other binary formats. We have our own mail service to mail with if we need to, and so on. In general, we have a lot of servers and systems going on. Yeah, in order to keep this all in line, you need oversight and insight. Sometimes it feels like our infrastructure looks like this, a herd of wild buffaloes. You never know when you lose one, and when you're trying to search for something, grabbing through logs, you go crazy because you've got no clue which one machine that one file was on that this first customer, the first victim, once opened. And then once you know where the data is, you still need the insight. You still need to have all the details on that specific system, on those logs, in order to be able to drag out the tiny, tiny details you want to move on with. Often also very convenient for the customer. They also want to know what's happening. What did you do during your assignment? Often blue has part of the story, but the red team is the one to complete that. This is the French Sherlock Holmes, by the way. So some of you might know him. As we're in France, I hope at least some know their history better than I know your history. And he said once, every contact leaves a trace. And that's a principle we started working with. So we have this buffalo herd of servers floating around, aiding us in our red team operations. And then we have insight in all the details. And that's good, so we can tell the customer exactly what happened on site. But then, if we have this data anyway, can't we use it to our advantage? Well, we can. The tooling we have for this, we need a tool we need a tool to steer the herd, and we need a tool to have the insight, and we came up with this. My apologies for the horrible logo. I'll just blame the other Mark on designing that. We did put it on a sticker though. So if you want a horrible logo on your laptop, come to see me afterwards. I got stickers with this. We built Red Elk. Red Elk is going to help us to gain oversight and insight. We go back to the infra picture, and you can already see there's more stuff going to happen here. So this is the basic picture. Again, compromised systems at the customer, infrastructure, the bouncing machines that just send data through, we have a lot of, and then our own backend. With that, we add Red Elk. It's an Elk machine, Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana, and it logs all the data. It grabs all the logs from the C2 servers and from our own web service. So basically, all the infrastructure we control is now gathered for each operation in one central machine where we can query it. So we can basically, on one place, find every call that ever hit our HTTP servers, or every command that was ever entered in our C2 servers. And we can search that and use that. We use it a lot during reporting and telling the customer what happened. But then something happens, like we said, we make sure that during our assignment, blue teams get a hint that something's going on, because we want them to get in action as well. As said, that's where the learning aspect is. So the SOC employee finds, or he gets an email saying, I got this weird Word document, my Word disappears when I open it, will you look at it? What will he do? He might submit it to VirusTotal, for example. Or he might break it open and have a look at the URL, so he would call our infrastructure. Or even the antivirus, the VirusTotal or similar services, they might also call our web server to see what's going on. Well, we can work with that, we can do something with that. It's what we're now doing in our Elk installation, not only gathering all the log files, but we also use it as a seam, essentially a red team seam. We constantly query all these providers for the MD5s of the files we set out. So as soon as one of our unique MD5 has been seen by VirusTotal, we know they're on track, they're onto us. And we can start playing with that. So knowledge is always an advantage, and we try to keep the knowledge and the advantage on our side to be a good trainer. We also, I said, read all the logs from the web servers, and same there, if we get a call from an unknown IP, which is clearly not a customer, maybe with a username that's not correct, we can alert on that. What we're currently working with is Cobalt Strike. It's an open source product, it's on our GitHub. If there's any developers or coders in the room that want to work with us, please get in touch. We are hoping to implement Faction, C2, and Empire as well. But yeah, we're busy guys as well doing the red team operations in it on a daily basis. So if you have any time at hand, then feel free to dive in and get us some pull requests. Once the data is in, we do some heavy enrichments. We query gray noise, we query all sorts of sources to enrich the data we have, to make sure we know as much as we can. Same on the redirectors. We use hproxy because that's what we started out with. First it works. Nginx and Apache, that's what we want to implement really badly, but as well that costs time. And we log all traffic. All traffic ever hitting us is logged. Also their enrichment, for example, if something is a Tor address, we'll flag it straight away. Might not be a reason for an alarm, because you have Tor addresses just getting your default website anyway. If an unknown IP hits our cobbled strike path, so that's longer, yeah, then we have an alarm. But general noise we want to filter out. Then getting back to the infrastructure and oversight, I just said we're using hproxy. That might deserve an explanation. For the people that have been doing red teaming and working with redirectors, you might quite often have used SOCAT or something similar, or even IP tables to just forward data. But we want these redirectors to be more intelligent. Basically, we only want C2 traffic going to our team server. We do not want to use a stager. So that means that if a staging call comes in, we throw it somewhere else. We can send it to Google, we can send it to an empty website. If random other calls come in for random files, we also do not want to send those to Cobalt Strike, because that might be a really easy way to detect us. There's been several issues with Cobalt Strike over the time where you could detect them on a double space and all the other stuff. Well, we avoid that by putting an hproxy in front and using that hproxy to direct the data where we want it to go. And the good thing is, once we do this split already on an hproxy, Red Elk benefits from that because it's already known if data is C2 traffic or random data or a file that gets downloaded. We basically install FileBeat on all the hardware we have, sending all the logs to one place. Logstash does some basic enrichment, and once it's an Elk, we do the rest of the enrichment. That means every 1 minute there's a cron job going to enrich all the data. Every 2 minutes, we copy all the C2 log files, so we copy the hard-coded logs from all team servers. If you worked with Cobalt Strike, you've all been grabbing in the logs because the GUI is good to work with, but not good to search in at all. Even cut and paste will often mess up. So we've all been SSH to the machine as root and grabbing two logs. Well, that's history with this. Now you can just click through it. We also copy all the screenshots and everything else we need. Basically, we want to see everything and have a central view of the whole operation. And now we can. We even have quite a number of predefined queries that we find very convenient. One of it is keystrokes. If you've been working with Cobalt Strike and do keylogging at victims, then often after a few days, if you have to find back that one password that someone typed in a week ago on one of the systems that you were into, it's quite hard to find it. And now you can have one query that will just display you all the keystrokes you want. Another one that's very convenient is the IOCs. What we tend to do during our assignment is keep a white team, so keep at least 1 or 2 guys at the customer up to date with what we're doing, to make sure that if there's a real incident during the same time, they can distinguish between what is the exercise and what is the real threat. And in order to do so, we deliver to them daily or weekly, depends on what we agree on, a list with all the IOCs we have. So they'll get all the MD5s and stuff. In the beginning, for us, that meant keeping a note of every file we put out there with the MD5. Well, if you're in a 4 or 5 months engagement with a full team, someone's going to mess up somewhere, somehow, always. But in this case, we just have one query, and there it goes. You have the full list of IOCs that you want to put to your customer. Screenshots, beacons, via all the other queries. I would say have a play with it and have a look at it. This is how Elk looks for the people that never have been playing with Elk. This is what it looks like. Here we see just an overview of log lines in Cobalt Strike. So the Cobalt Strike log line itself and all the enrichment that we've been doing on every specific line. Because if you know Cobalt Strike logs, all these details are not in every log line. They're only in the first log line. So we enrich that, and now every line has all the data we need. Basically, if we open one of these items up, you can see all the details. This was an input line. Jody typed an LS. It's in this file. This is the downloaded file. So even if you click on it, you'll have the full log file as you would normally have. You can still go old school and grab through that. And you can query on it. And I think that's the strongest part, that you can query on it. This is an overview of the IOCs, servers that have been created, files that have been uploaded with all the MD5s. You can export these and send them to your customer in order to have the IOC list already. All the screenshots available. with even with thumbnails. If you've made a screenshot of something that was interesting throughout your operation, you don't have to save that all. It's all in here. So if you do a report in the end, you've got all the screenshots you've ever made available in one place for easy to work with. And there's one example of queries I tend to use a lot. At Friday night, I stop working, and at Monday I think, oh, well, what did I do? Or might even work through the weekend. Or my colleague is only until Wednesday, and on Thursday I have to continue where he stopped. I'll just have a query running on the input line someone did. So we see Jody here working on S-Win45 and S-Win23, and he's just doing all kinds of stuff on that, including some port scanning. And somewhere he decides to do a PSXEC to S-Win45. And within a few seconds, we get Jody inputting stuff on S-Win45. Basically, that's where the lateral movement happens. Try and do this in cobalt strike logs. Find back where someone moved somewhere else and then continue on that machine. That's going to cost you some time. What's also very interesting is all the user agents we see. These are just, the D pixels, this is a setup with a default cobalt strike profile, which you would never use in a real operation, but D pixel is the default. This is from a training we ran, this data. This is the cobalt strike as expected. But here you see all kinds of other stuff floating around, and it's very interesting. Once you have this insight and you start looking around, what you find. It's really easy to build all kinds of queries in Red Elk, so that's also very convenient and fun to play with. These are the lists that we tag. So we tag all the lines that come from the red team. So at least if you want to build some query to find some stuff, you can exclude the red team, because we will be testing our own stuff as well. So there will be a lot of noise in there from the red team itself. We also try, as soon as we know the IP of the customer, we try to tag that. Because then basically you can build a query saying, if someone talks to my C2, but it's not the customer, we have an alarm. Something goes wrong, or something is onto us, or maybe just someone started his persistent beacon from home. It can be everything. Indicators. And we're moving towards the failures that the blue team might make. I tell almost every time our customers, someone in the organization will upload the sample to VirusTotal or something else. And every professional blue teamer would say, but why? We all know you shouldn't do that. You should keep the investigation in-house. And still they all do. But if you look at the antivirus product that there are, this is the Symantec EDR, they even have buttons to do so. To VirusTotal or to their own sandbox, but even the own sandbox will do the queries, the external queries, that the malware does, and we'll find them in our logs, and we know, hey, someone is sending our sample, our unique sample for that one persistent user to a sandbox. You might have 5 other persistent users that will then hide a bit better, or at least change. Same goes for, I believe this is Defender. Same goes for Defender. Also there, the send button to send to a VirusTotal. And after doing that for quite a few times during our trainings, this is all the sandbox we gathered. I even had screenshots from quite a few, but there's hundreds and hundreds of IPs of machines used by several AV vendors to test the malware you send them. And the fun thing is, once you send malware to VirusTotal or to any other of the generally known parties, you'll get a few beacons flowing in. Then it goes silent for an hour. Then you get another wave. And then often after a few hours, if your malware is really doing crazy stuff, like if you automate Mimikatz or something like that, then after like 12 hours, you'll go crazy. You'll be almost DDoSed by sandboxes going on your infrastructure. Other indicators we can use apart from the sandboxing. A very interesting one is the user agents. As we all know, in the Cobalt Strike profile, you set your own user agent. So if you have any other user agent visiting your profile address, so the address that no one should know except for the malware, then you're pretty sure that someone's going on. So if you see Python requests coming in, someone's likely playing around with your stuff. Or even better, if you see, where's the hproxy here in the end, is the user agent. If you see Telegram bots like stuff coming in on your C2 URL or at the URL that you share the file, you know someone is texting someone else containing the URL that points to your stuff. And you don't know why yet, but at least you know something is happening there and you need to take care. Another interesting one is, All right, like we said, once you set up this logging and you know everything, then you see a lot of stuff. What we found here is we set up a fresh redirector and did not use it at all yet in our operation. In the end, we also didn't use it because the moment we set it up, we got these kinds of requests, loads of them, which appears either some weird application that is polling all the time or even malware on iPhones and Androids. We don't know what it is. It's not our customer. In the end, we decided not to use this redirector, but we did park it aside to see if we could play with it. So far, we haven't had time yet to play with this, but we've had it for a few months now, and it's still flowing in like crazy. So it might be a pre-used IP that the VPS service provider gave to us after it was used for malware, or yeah, we have no idea what exactly this is. If someone knows, then I'd love to hear after the talk. Other indicators. These are now the next group is what we're still working on. We also want indicators on the inside. One really good example could be this. If you are at a customer and you see the change date of the KRB TGT being somewhere 2010, and somewhere during your operation you suddenly see that they're actually updating their KRB TGT passwords, well, it might be a regular update, but if the last one was 2010, then it's likely someone trying to get attackers out, so you know that there's something you have to work on. And in the same idea, we have a few more that we want to, we would like to track. So online services, which we're already doing, is AV hashes, where we check the MD5s of our stuff aren't seen in VirusTotal and sort of like stuff. Blacklist IPs, blacklisted certificates that visitors is all typical stuff to alarm on. Then the traffic to our infrastructure, weird user agent hitting us, even customer IP hitting us in a URL we don't expect, because we expect everyone can visit us. People have scanners at home, they scan our infrastructure all the time, so we got a lot of rubbish going on. But as soon as we see rubbish coming from the customer IP, then apparently someone within the client decided to scan our website. No, that's odd, then something is also going on. So that, like in that same family, we got quite a few stuff we want to be testing. Current status, IOCs work like a charm. They helped us out quite a few times, where we get a ping like, hey, your MD5 has been seen at the provider. Unknown traffic flowing to our C2 is also one that's used a lot and gives us a lot of interesting information, because even if the blue team is careful and they do not want to give away that they're investigating, there's always someone just visiting our website to see if there's even a web page on it. Even if it's just the get slash. But if it's coming from inside the customer, to us that's weird and it might be alarm worthy. Well, there's many more ideas we have and that we'll have to work out. But there was another wish we had, which was live reaction on actions. What I just told you is that we're gathering an information position and we'll use that information to be a better red team, to be a better trainer. But we also wanted the option to directly react on live action. So if something calls in, if the persistence calls in, you might want to respond on that in a different way every day. We never put full stage beacons at customers' disks or whatever. So we always work with a stager. And we never work with the Cobalt Strike stager, meaning I've got stageless payloads somewhere on the internet, on web servers, on file servers, externally, wherever. And the stuff that we bring in and leave with the customer is often a VBA macro, some piece of PowerShell, something custom, 100% custom. And if it starts, it will download the full stageless Cobalt Strike and start that, because that avoids us using stagers. And even more important, we stay in control. Because every morning, or every minute of the day, we get to decide what we feed to that persistence. So if at a certain point we don't need a user anymore, we only have to delete that one file that one specific user was downloading in his persistence, and nothing will happen anymore, and it's silent. We want it back, we place back the file. And persistent, and the persistence on that desktop is live again. Well, stuff, what we also use often is, like I said, we do a lot with Word macros, normal.m, for example, but then you're living in Word, and we have a bot that's automatically migrating to other processes, for example, to Explorer.exe or any other process that we want to migrate to. That's fully automated, because we all know Word might be killed by the user at a certain point. So that's where this idea came from, red file, which is basically an add-on, a piece of software that we can put on one or more redirectors. Basically on the redirectors we serve files from, we serve the stageless content from. And basically it's Python, it's built in Flask. And I hear you already think, but if you want to serve files, that's what a web server is for, right? You can just place a file on there and delete it when you don't need it anymore. But we want more interaction. We want to be able, based on certain characteristics, what we do want to send back or what we don't want to send back. It's very thin code. That means if you want modules, if you want to build modules for this Flask tool, well, we're going to see in a second. It's literally 10 lines of code to have new behavior. Some ideas we had is return code based on content, on user agents. If we know the user agent is always Word, because we have a Word persistence, why not feed all the others something else? So if the investigator sees that Word calls a certain URL and he would go there with a normal browser, you give him something totally different. And then let them play with that for a while. We also had some ideas to have only persistence triggering when we did not already have a line out there. So if you have 10 machines that are persistent, then they will all call back to you every morning or every time a user opens Word. You don't need all these 10 lines. Actually, having more lines, you're more visible. So why not make something that once one line is active, it will make sure the rest does not get activated. And once your line drops for some reason, you flip a switch and everything's back up for new persistence. Well, options are endless. And this is basically one example where we only return the user agent. But what you see, you will see more code in the next slides. What I basically want to show you is it's really thin and easy readable and easy to build on. So I want to get you guys involved in playing with this and start coding it yourself. But basically, for every call we get in on a certain URL, we load a class, it does an init, and basically says it will return a file type and a file content. That's all it does. So it's that simple. Well, given such a modular setup, what can we serve you? What can we deliver? And we've been playing with that. And we don't have a lot of modules prepared already, but as this is so easy to modify, often as soon as a problem occurs during an assignment, I code 10 lines of code and it's solved because the persistence is served in the way we want it. I'm going to show you 3 examples on how we did that, on what we did. IP only. What we see here in the top is red elk again, so this is log lines from the redirector that serves our stageless payload. And the payload is in source git.txt. And in that file you'll find some base64 encoded, maybe compressed, maybe short, whatever, but you'll find the payload there. And the persistence knows how to undo that and start the persistence. And what we see here is that every time the persistence gets called, we have 3 calls coming in from Palo Alto Networks, and then the client calls in. Every time. You also see that the Palo Alto tries with different user agents. No idea why they do that, but they try it 3 times and thereafter the customer calls in. So given this knowledge, we wanted to make sure that the Palo Alto thinks it's all okay, and the customer still gets his payload. So we can work with an IP block on this IP, right? Or maybe an IP whitelist. An IP whitelist on the client. That would work. You could just IP tables for that. Why build a program? Well, in that case, you would deny Palo Alto access to the file in general, and that might be a hint for them. Apparently, a URL is called time after time, and we're not allowed to see it. That's odd. So we wanted more control over what we give back to the client, but also to Palo Alto. So what we build is, this is just an example, but basically what I would do is I give to Palo Alto, I give the GNU license or something, or just a robots.txt, and my real customer gets the real payload. And that's what you see happening here. One curl call to the URL, it will get a default payload, and then from another location, it will get a payload specific for the customer. Lines of code needed to build this. If you count them, it will be 15 to 20 lines, I guess. So it's not complex. Again, get involved, give it a try if you're into this kind of stuff. Another module, one that was actually built during an assignment because we had failures on our side, once every 30 seconds serving payloads. We had a user, we had Word backdoored, the normal.m file backdoored, and apparently the user we had backdoored had a lot of Word files on his desktop or somewhere else, and in the morning he would open them all, he would select them all, and right-click open. So what we would see is 18 new beacons in 3 minutes. And remember, I said we had some auto-migration process going on to Explorer.exe. What do you think happens if you try from 18 different beacons, from 18 different word processes, try to migrate all to one process being Explorer.exe? That goes wrong. Desktop crash, gone. So it was clear we needed to solve that. And basically the answer is really simple. We decided to only serve our payload. In this case, normally it would be a full base64, but that's ugly on the screen, so that's the payload. We only serve it once every 30 seconds. The code basically maintains, when's the last time I gave out this payload? Is it shorter than 30 seconds? Then give overload. And the persistence, the VBR macro, it knows if it reaches overload, do nothing. And voila, problem solved. Again, it's a bit more code. Let's give it 30 lines. Again, easy to do. Based on that, we can go further. We can start decoying our customer. And we can start playing around, because we feed Word the real payload, the real backdoor. And if we feed nothing to the investigator, then he still might have questions, or he might stop searching. But I just told you in the beginning of the presentation that I want to get the blue team involved. I want them to start looking. So why not play around with that a bit more? And for that, I've got, there are quite a few ideas we can do with that. And there's one I want to demonstrate to you. Let me see if I can get that over to that screen. Yes, there we are. Yep, plus it a bit. This is based on a key. So basically, this is the URL that's called here is based on a key, and it's only used once. You can only use this key once. So it's not used for persistence, but it can be used for the initial infection of your customer, so the email you send out. And we also know, in this case, it's set up that it knows we'll have a proxy checking before the customer checks. So the first time we go in, I'll just be here, enter. First time we go in, we get a robots.txt. Only thing I'm going to do now is press the refresh button. So the proxy reads a robots.txt. There's no reason for the proxy or the external party checking URLs. There's no reason to deny access for the victim. So next is the victim. He's going to get the same URL. Voila, there's the PowerShell code. This is the default code, strike PowerShell, but we might serve something else, but it's the code. We got access on this one desktop, we build persistence, our operation goes on. And later on, there's a blue team guy saying something weird happened with this one email on that one day, and he figures out where the email is. He retrieves it from an old bin somewhere, and he's going to look at it. He said something odd was going on today. Let's have a look at the URL and let's look what it does. We give him a Bitcoin stealer that doesn't even work. It's getting the wallet dot and it posts it somewhere. And he looks at this, yeah, indeed something weird was going on. Someone's trying to steal our Bitcoins. But hey, we're a financial institution. We don't do Bitcoin mining. We don't have Bitcoins on our desktop. So is this a real threat to us? Should we further investigate? Maybe, maybe not. Interesting. But still, it's interesting. So he's going to show a colleague and look it up once again. I found this Bitcoin stealer, and yeah, it's weird that we're targeted for Bitcoin stealer, but maybe it's a big run for a lot of phishing for a lot of people. But still, maybe we should. It's fun to see, and it's fun to see what it does. So maybe in the next team meeting we should also have a look. So the next team meeting comes up and he says, oh, 1 minute, put me on the screen. I've got something I want to show you. There's this URL here that was sent to us in phishing, and it gives us some code. And yeah, he visits the link again. And this is what he'll get. Also not a download, but an image. Like I said, we can make the file content and set the file type. Every time, again and again and again, based on the characteristics we get in. Voila. Boom. How does this improve red teaming? Like we said, Blue has to learn. We want Blue in the learning phase. So, but all these tools, we can steer the investigation that Blue is doing. So think again on this boxing match. If I'm the trainer and I want blue to move more, I'm going to give him some punches and then move around the ring to train him how to walk, to train him to follow and to attack and to move. So basically, being on top like this, you can actually divert and steer your blue team and the investigation in the direction you want it, which might be away from you, because you might have a few more goals to catch. But as the goal is to train them, you might also move them closer to you, if that's what's needed at that moment in time. So it's very interesting to play with. In summary, what should you remind after the presentation? Well, there's one that's not on this list. If you're a coder, please come and help. Because the code can be better. I'm a crappy coder. It works, but I'm a crappy coder. So please dive into the code, look at it, look at Red Elk, look at Red File. You'll find it on our GitHub. But most important thing to remember from this talk, the goal of red teaming is to make the blue teams better. You're hired as a trainer. You're not hired to steal money and then do a cool dance and say you stole it all. Actually, I would go as far as to say that if the blue team did not detect the red team has failed. I'll repeat that once more. If the blue team did not detect anything during a red teaming assignment, the red team has failed. They did not give the blue team a chance to learn. Red File and Red Elk are here to help you. And if you're the blue teamer in this room, be critical to what you do. Be critical to where you send your samples. Be critical when you start looking at websites that might be dodgy, because there might be a real adversary or it might be a red team behind that, monitoring everything you do and knowing that you're investigating. Thank you so far. If there's any questions, I believe there's an app for that, or you can just shout out loud. I've got 3 minutes for questions, I think. Yeah. What you're saying, I'm going to rephrase and correct me if I'm doing it wrong. Isn't it a danger for red team to expose yourself? Because you might be caught by the blue team. They might actually be better than you are. And that might end the red team, and it doesn't give them enough to learn. Is that what you're? How do you assess the levels? Yeah, that's really hard to do. I would say if the red team is really caught and evaded out of the organization, that can happen one time. If it happens twice, then the blue team might need to search for a new sparring partner with different skill set. But it's hard to assess that up front. Well, yeah, the other thing is, that's what we do. We go in really high level. So we go in really high level, use domain fronting, use whatever we have available for this first desktop infection. And if we then see that the level of the blue team and the organization is way lower, we might do a second infection, which is easier to catch. So we have a line as a backup line, which will likely not be found. And we have this operational line that's more matching the blue team and making a fair game, which also solves the problem of you being evicted out of the company, because you still have this more hidden and better line as a spare. In that case, thank you all for your time. I've got Red Elk stickers, so if you want one or a few, find me afterwards.